Back again. This time we're going to do a video on Abraxas, a very, very, very interesting character, or deity, should I say, that embodies the opposites. It's a very important deity for me to speak about because along my series of growths and pertaining to the information that I've gathered along the journey that I've traveled in picking up various systems, etc., I've come to find that the idea, for instance, right, of Abraxas has played an important life in the lives of the writers of information that I've studied. To name a few, and I'll be reiterating by saying this, some of the keynotes that I've put inside of this lecture, but like Crowley, for instance, had a very deep tie with the energy of Abraxas, if you will, and spoke some very key things and made invocations to Abraxas, but about that deity. Another one, Carl Jung, of course, who was influenced heavily by Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche had a lot to say about Abraxas as well, and there are some real key psychological elements to the understanding of Abraxas, and key understandings that if you put into place with the knowledge that you already have of certain systems, or if you're new to this, for instance, the information that you could gain from the understanding of Abraxas, for instance, will allow you to put this esoteric information in line with the proper view of things, and it also, which is another reason why I'm showing it on this channel, has a lot to do with psychology as well. I mean, I a lot of times will put information on this page that borderlines the paranormal, if you will, and I know that can possibly make an individual wonder, like, why is he positing information on the occult or different things of that nature? Well, and it's because of the fact that we're diving into symbolism, and when all is said and done, symbolism holds deep psychological truths within it. That's what the realm of archetypes is, as explained by C.G. Jung, from the idea of St. Augustine as well. So when all is said and done, I'm basically approaching, when I speak about gods, deities, we're talking about energies. I approach them from that angle because they're basically psychological energies that are imprinted into the fabric of reality that we are linking with in order to create some type of understanding or some framework of understanding for life, and the ancient individuals that were initiates of certain wisdom systems, if you will, knew this, and they hid them in stories, so let me see. Without further ado, I think I'm just going to get into the lecture, and this lecture will be titled Abraxas, the Great Archon and Master Key to Understanding the Mind and Eastern and Western Mystery Traditions, because spirituality and psychology as well as sexuality go hand in hand. And the sexuality part, once again, people are like, well, sexuality, Sigmund Freud, if you get into unveiling some of his psychological ideas, there were a lot of ideas that were very explicitly put out there in your face kind of sexual format, and you're dealing with opposites there, so and so is the idea of Abraxas. So I'm going to start reading from this this page here, or these pages rather here, and you'll get a real healthy taste for the idea of Abraxas. And it's really, like I said, it's been really eye-opening for me. And I will reiterate this too, that this will be a two-part lecture, because I'm going to get into tying this system into, the system rather, of the understanding of Abraxas into how far it can go back east, as far as I think it was to the Ming Dynasty, in the Taoist idea. So we're gonna get into that in the next lecture, and I'm also gonna get into some Proto-Indo-European etymological root studies on the idea of Abraxas, and also approach it from some other angles. Without further ado, though, Abraxas is a word of mystic meaning in the system of the Gnostic Basilides, being there applied to the great Archon. And a footnote. Archon is a Greek word meaning ruler. It is the masculine present participle of the verb erex, meaning to be first to rule. Some derivatives include the words monarchy and hierarchy. In the Gnostic ideation, the archons are seven supernatural beings associated with the 7 planets, who are considered responsible for the creation of the physical world. And that also corresponds to the Elohim, because we're dealing with the 7. That's the Elohim, are the let us make man in our own image after our likeness. You know what I mean? So it loosely corresponds to that idea in Genesis. However, as we will come to see, especially through some of the readings of Carl Gustav Jung's 7 Sermons to the Dead, you're going to see that that Abraxas is the God above God after a large way. And this is a rabbit hole we're going to go down that you're going to get a whole lot from if you keep an open mind. All right. So let's see where we last left off here. Okay, so basically, Abraxas is the great Archon, Megas Archon, the princeps of the 365 spheres. The princeps word meaning first one or leader, okay? And the 365 spheres are what they call the Oranoi in the Greek, okay? And I did a little side study on the Oranoi word, okay? Oranoi banks or derives from the word Oranos, and may be related to Proto-Indo-European root H2WERS, rain. In the Sanskrit, it's Varsati, meaning it rains. Varuna, the Sanskrit sea god, may play into this via the etymology. Oranos, the vaulted sky on which the stars were attached and the sun traveled. So Oranos means that. Sky or heaven. Also the region above this vault, the home of the gods. The third piece here is the universe, is what it can pertain to. 4 is anything shaped like the sky, the vaulted ceiling or tent. Okay, and in another lecture we saw that to be Neith, or no, Nuit in the Egyptian cosmogony, and I'll throw a picture of that up as well, though, too, as far as the reference to the vaulted sky, okay, upon which the stars append. So, the word is found in Gnostic texts such as the Holy Book of the Great Invisible Spirit, and also appears in the Greek magical papyri. It was engraved on certain antique gemstones, which there'll probably be some pictures of those posted onto this lecture as well, called on that account Abraxas stones, which were used as amulets or charms. As the initial spelling on stones was Abrasax, the spelling of Abraxas seen today probably originates in the confusion made between the Greek letters sigma and xi in the Latin transliteration. So, continuing, important to this lecture, the 7 letters spelling its name, or Abraxas' name, may represent each of the 7 classical planets. The word may be related to abracadabra, although other explanations exist, okay? There are similarities and differences between such figures in reports about Basilides' teaching ancient Gnostic texts, the larger Greco-Roman magical traditions, and modern magical and esoteric writings. Speculations have been proliferated on Abraxas in recent centuries, who has been claimed to be both an Egyptian god and a demon. Abraxas is the idea of energy, Abraxas is the idea and energy of Enantiodromia personified. So we're going to get into that portion of things because, like as you already know, I'm big on Carl Gustav Jung's take on things because before even I ever heard of him, I was studying things from that standpoint of, how does symbology, how does do occult ideologies or anything fit into the real world of pragmatism? How do they deal with the mind? How can we make this usable or useful as an idea for ourselves and then also for others? I've always been on that type of standpoint in studying things like this, and that leads to an empirical approach, you know what I mean? And that's what Jung was all about. So we're going to look into Enantiodromia because it really gets into the understanding of what Abraxas is about, okay? So Enantiodromia, enantios means opposite, and dromos means running course. So opposites running their course is a principle introduced in the West by psychiatrist Carl Jung. In Psychological Types, Jung defines enantiodromia as the emergence of the unconscious opposite in course of time. It is similar to the principle of equilibrium in the natural world, in that any extreme is opposed by the system in order to restore balance. When things get to their extreme, they turn into their opposite. Jung adds that this characteristic phenomenon practically always occurs when an extreme one-sided tendency dominates conscious life. In time, an equally powerful counterposition is built up, which first inhibits the conscious performance and subsequently breaks through the conscious control. However, in Jungian terms, a thing psychically transmogrifies into its shadow opposite in the repression of psychic forces that are thereby cathected into something powerful and threatening. So that's the whole idea behind the creation of the shadow through repression of certain things that are within you, that don't vibe with society and that you have to lock away in a closet somewhere. Basically, those ideologies get no place, so they turn into some type of psychological split off that unconsciously will pop out here or there and could ruin your life, right? So this principle was explicitly understood and discussed in the principles of traditional Chinese religion, as in Taoism and Yin and Yang. A certain premise of the I Ching is that Yang lines become Yin when they have reached their extreme, and vice versa. So that's Enantiodromia right there, right? In this lecture, I will also, during some of the readings from Jung's writing on Abraxas, touch upon how this idea of Abraxas links further with Taoism, and we'll get into that in the second part of this lecture, all right? So, in respect to the statement that says Jung defines enantiodromia as the emergence of the unconscious opposite in the course of time, I wrote this little footnote that says tempus edax rerum, okay? And that's Latin for time is the devourer of all things, or time devourer of all things. Ovid spoke this in his work Metamorphosis. In the idea of Abraxas, this shows Abraxas to be linked with time in its most abstract form, and if time in his oppositeness, yet unity and expression, since Saturn typifies these energies also and is ATU 21, or the 21st tarot card called the World, which is also the system. We have in Abraxas a master symbol containing all opposites and phenomenon, swallowing all symbols of any type, a master key that explains the office of symbol and God energy. Okay, it's something really, really, really powerful to think about when, as we're entering the exposition of this idea. So some ideas and the name of Abraxas held in various cultures and ideas from scholars based upon what the name could have meant to different cultures. That's what we're getting into next. So J.J. Bellarmine thinks it is a compound of the Egyptian words Abrak and Sax, meaning the honorable and hallowed word, or in quotations, the word is adorable. Samuel Sharp finds in it an Egyptian invocation to the Godhead, meaning hurt me not. E.A. Wallace Budge, a well-known Egyptologist, surmised that Abraxas was a form of the Adam Kedmon of the Kabbalist and the primal man whom God made in his own image. And this we will come to find the notion of speaking of the primal man is very correct in Jung's idea of Abraxas, or towards Jung's idea of Abraxas, because every human being is said to be Abraxas in this world. Thus, the idea of man being created in the image of God being reiterated in this doctrine as well. And I really like E.A. Wallace Budge's works. You know, he was an Egyptologist. Basically put out the Egyptian Book of the Dead in a very early format, and I personally had that book to read in a time where I really just needed some books to read, and was able to study the Egyptian Book of the Dead, and got a lot from it. You know what I mean? It was I didn't know that much about symbolism or anything during that time, though, but it gave me some things to look back on that I still even do look back on and am reminded of, as it's a book that's full of such rich symbolism. But anyways, continuing. Let me see. So in the Hebrew understanding of this, Adam Geiger sees in it Grecicized, or from the Greek idea, form of ha barakah, the blessing, a meaning which C.W. King declares is philologically untenable. All right, to the next page here. J.B. Pessarius derives it from Ab, father, bara, to create, and a negative, the uncreated father, basically. And I can pretty much agree with that in some ways as well, though, too. I mean, that was pretty interestingly put together there from a Hebrew perspective. So Giuseppe Barzillai goes back for explanation to the first verse of the prayer attributed to Nehunia ben Hakana, the literal rendering of which is, O God, with thy mighty right hand deliver the unhappy people, forming the initial and final letters of the words of Abracad, pronounced Abracad, with the meaning the host of winged ones, for example, angels. While this theory can explain the mystic word abracadabra, the association of this phrase with Abraxas is uncertain. 365 is a number associated with both Abraxas and Hecate, goddess of the underworld. A popular and ubiquitous goddess from the time of Hesiod until late antiquity, unknown in Homer and harmless in Hesiod, she emerges by the 5th century as a more sinister divine figure associated with magic and witchcraft, lunar lore, and creatures of the night, dog sacrifices, and illuminated cakes, as well as doorways and crossroads. And doorways and crossroads are coagulatio and conjunctio symbolism, which are largely present in the iconography that relates to Hecate. And we can also look at that as well, though, with if we can look at Abraxas in from a more phenomenological aspect, like in the world, the way that opposites tend to come together, that's something that deals with the unconscious, the way that the unconscious sometimes is operating unbeknownst to us in certain situations on our behalf or against us, i.e. in the form of the shadow through oppression and in the way that we will project certain things onto other people or into other situations. We have a joining or a conjunction of certain situations and a coagulation, because these are things coming into form via those methods and means, which are, if you look at it, very indirect, very numinous and powerful. So the idea of Hecate, the goddess of sorcery and witchcraft and things of that nature, go to show that the way that the psyche works on the more unseen portion is very much akin to sorcery, witchcraft, and things of that nature, okay? Excuse me. So Diocletian dedicated a crypt to Hecate with 365 steps. So the number 365 corresponds to Abraxas as well as Hecate, right? And Diocletian dedicated a crypt to Hecate with 365 steps leading down to it. Cave mysteries in her honor seem also to have been celebrated in Samothrace. Cave mysteries also had a lot to do with Mithras. So there are a lot of intersections that we're going to come into here. Cave mysteries in her. Okay, so the Hecate mysteries flourished in Rome towards the end of the 4th century. Okay, so Rome is also too where, you know, the cult of Mithras hit ground zero with the coming of Christianity. Okay, so let's see. Hecate as the goddess of crossroads is linked to the symbolism of conjunctio, as crossroads are such. Mercury's and Hermes had crossroads as a symbol in common with Hecate. Abraxas is shown also to carry a whip and a shield, or the solar disk, which is akin to Hecate's torch. Okay, so there are a lot of similarities there that I'm throwing out here. A curious Hebrew Gematria enumeration of Abraxas. So 365 equals Aleph, He, Beth, Resh, Aleph, He, Zadi, Aleph, Samek. Okay, and that the numbers for that is 1, 5, 2, 200, 1, 5, 90, 1, and 60 respectively, okay? And that will add up to 365, okay? And that's in the Hebrew. So, and that spells Abraxas, okay? For all that couldn't put that one together. All right, so I'm going to show an insert on this footnote here, but the iconography of the Arma Christi actually depicts essential symbolism key to the myths of which we are now speaking, and depict the weapons Christ used to triumph over Satan, and are also weapons of heraldry. They are seen in or pertain allegorically to Christ, Abraxas, Mithras, and also Prometheus. And for example, these weapons or tools are the cross, ladder, hammer, the rooster, the star, pincers, the spear, chalice, the torch, the lantern, the sword, the whip, etc. Okay, Wendelin discovers, and now we're getting into the Greek idea of things, okay? Wendelin discovers a compound of initial letters amounting to 365 in numerical value of 4 Hebrew and 3 Greek words, all written with Greek characters Ab, Ben, Ruach, Hagatos, Soteria, Apo, Zailu, Father, Son, Spirit, Holy, salvation from the cross. According to a note of Isaac de Beausobres, Jean Hardouin accepted the first 3 of these, taking the 4 others for the initials of the Greek Anthropouson, Hagio, Xylio, saving mankind by the Holy Cross. Isaac de Beausobres derives Abraxas from the Greek Habro and Sao, the beautiful, the glorious Savior. Now, by 365, I put a quick footnote. Mithras also equals 365. Mithras, Mu, Iota, Theta, Rho, Alpha, Sigma are respectively numbers 40, 10, 9, 5, 100, 1, and 200, which will equal 365. Okay. So I wrote another note here. Janus and Coulson's, Coulson's is an Etruscan deity, represented watchers of gateways. Coulson's office was watching the gateways to the netherworlds. Also, Coulson's was a god who protected boundaries and liminal spaces, which are sacred spaces, okay, as well, which Abraxas is very much in a liminal space in his explained position as a uniter of opposites, and then also as being above all the extra creation that comes into play, okay? Last but not least, Janus and Coulson share a link to the number 365 by what Pliny the Elder spoke of their hand gestures as positioned to represent the 365 days of the year. January is the first day or the first month in our calendric year, and it gets its name from Janus. Abraxas is a star deity, all right? The star in the tarot is Aquarius, which occurs in January on the 20th, and its arrival into the solar ray, for instance, steals the show from Capricorn, the devil in the tarot, which comes directly before it. 365 relates to, in other sources, the activity of the creature related to its karma by its incarnation, animation of the earth by the spirit of life, the age of Enoch when God took him from the earth, the number of negative precepts in the law of Moses via the Torah, the number of offering tables surrounding Osiris's tomb, the number of angels involved in the creation of Adam's body, which each of those 365 angels, worked on 365 body parts, and there's said to be 365 veins in the human body, and this is per the Book of the Secrets of John in the Nag Hammadi Library. The number of points of a deck of cards equals 365, and the number of cards is 52, and 52 are the number of weeks in a year. And let's see, the Greek name for the Nile, which was deified by the Egyptians due to its yearly rising, is Nilos, which equals 365. And then let me see. I think I am going to forego reading a bunch of this other stuff here that I wrote because we're going to be very short on time and I don't want to drag it out too far. Okay. The Greek agiano noma, or the Greek word for that is in English holy name, equals 365 as well, though, too. Okay. So let's go to the next page. Okay, so a few other important citations from Hermann Hesse's 1919 novel Damien. The bird fights its way out of the egg. The egg is the world. Who would be born must first destroy a world. The bird flies to God. That God's name is Abraxas, and that's Max Damien in Hermann Hesse's 1919 novel Damien. So here's another one. Abraxas has a much deeper significance. We may conceive of the name as that of the Godhead, whose symbolic task is the uniting of godly and devilish elements, and that in and of itself, in alchemical terms, would be called the conjunctio oppositorum, the conjunction or joining of opposites, okay? So from Carl Jung's 1916 book, 7 Sermons to the Dead, Abraxas is an important figure in Carl Jung's 1916 book, Seven Sermons to the Dead, a representation of the driving force of individuation, synthesis, maturity, or oneness, referred with the figures for the driving forces of differentiation, emergence of consciousness, and opposites: Helios, God, the Sun, and the Devil. And I wrote a footnote on this. On the comment about Helios, the Sun, and the Devil, which could be typified by Saturn, we could say, we can look at an equivalent saying. The universe, Tav, okay, equals Saturn. The world / the system is the hexagram equals the Sun, and Helios. The universe, Tav, equals 400. The hexagram / the Sun equals 200. 200 times 2, and also 200 plus 200 equals 400. So 400 being the number of the universe. So back to the idea of the universe again. So it's a continuous cyclical thing. Okay. So let me see. We can see the twin nature of both sun and earth, mind and body, soul and luna, Christ and cross, spirit and matter, which are represented here in the hexagram and universe idea. So that's a little bit complicated, but if you can piece together that the long list of things that I shot out there pertain to what came directly before, you'll understand it. And that's how, like, understanding things with tarot symbolism or symbolism period. Symbolism will have a long list of correspondences to them, and they might seem to the untrained mind and ear like something different is being talked about. No, it's all the same thing. So there was a God about, basically in Carl Jung's Seven Sermons to the Dead. This is a statement from that, coming back to this after the footnote that I put. There is a God about whom you know nothing, because men have forgotten him. We call him by his name, Abraxas. He is less definite than God or devil. Abraxas is activity. Nothing can resist him but the unreal. Abraxas stands above the sun god and above the devil. If the Plemora were capable of having a being, Abraxas would be its manifestation. That which is spoken by God, the Son, is life. That which is spoken by the devil is death. Abraxas speaketh the hallowed and accursed word, which is life and death at the same time. Abraxas begetteth truth and lying, good and evil, light and darkness, in the same word and in the same act. Wherefore is Abraxas terrible. In the 1516 novel Utopia by Thomas More, the island called Utopia once had the name Abraxa, which scholars have suggested is a related use. So there was something more that he was speaking about in the whole idea of the word Utopia, and saying that it once had the name Abraxas. Okay, so I put a note here on the side of this, and I put Utopia is an imagined state of things, or a place in which everything is perfect. The important ambiguity of this word, which makes it much like Abraxas as a model by which to understand it or him, comes from the Greek ou, which means not, and topos, meaning a place. Utopia. Thus we get the word utopia. It's not a place. Abraxas is once again, like when I talk about gods, it's like we're not talking about a god itself. We're talking about the energy that represents it, that represents the thing. So, and just as it was said earlier, that hold on real quick, because this will directly put you on target. If the Plemora were capable of having a being, Abraxas would be its manifestation. So we're looking at a symbolic entity, okay, that will help you to break into a higher level of understanding beyond good and evil, or beyond the opposites, okay? So Jacques Collin de Plancy's Dictionnaire Infernal, which means infernal dictionary, published in 1818, states that Abraxas or Abraxas was an anguipede, a deity represented with snake feet, pagan god of Asian theogonies, with a rooster's head, dragon's feet, and a whip in his hand. The Plancy says that demonologists describe Abraxas as a demon having a king's head and snakes in lieu of feet. Abraxas is invoked in Aleister Crowley's 1913 work, The Gnostic Mass of Ecclesia Gnostica Catholica. So that's like the basically the universal Gnostic Church is kind of what basically, because it says the Gnostic Mass. Oh no, the Gnostic Mass of Ecclesia Gnostica Catholica. That's the Gnostic Universal Church. Okay, so I put a footnote here. Also, Jung, Nietzsche, and Charles Manson were known to make mention of this deity quite descriptively. Jung and Crowley, in their description of opposites, symbolism, and will towards selfhood, did so. Nietzsche, in his description of the Übermensch and the whole idea of beyond good and evil, which Abraxas is, and Manson basically made a song by that name, and he basically, by his own admission, talks about Abraxas in a prison interview in which he was present, speaking about Abraxas. And I think I might be able to queue up the video itself on that, because it's really, some people say, oh yeah, let's listen to a madman talk about Abraxas. Wow, okay, Mr. Grant, you're a madman too. But if you think about people like Charles Manson, no matter what anybody would say or think about him, if you listen to some of his crazy interviews, there's some key things that this dude said that would kind of make you raise your eyebrows, like, man, like, there is a fine line between wisdom and insanity. You know what I mean? Jung, for instance, was a very, very wise individual. Very, very wise individual. His analytic psychology is practiced by people till this very day, though. But I mean, if you knew Jung, and if you knew him in his introvertedness, if you were able to sit up and listen to the visions and the different things that he sees in things, you probably would think he was crazy. There's a fine line between genius and insanity. You know what I mean? Nietzsche, for instance, went insane upon seeing a horse being beat by his owner. That was the story, at least, But his idea of Abraxas, his reverence towards Abraxas, for instance, Aleister Crowley, for instance, you know what I'm saying? He was by his own admission, the most wicked man on the face of the planet. His name Therion had the equivalent to the number 666. Aleister Crowley, by his own admission, revered Abraxas as well, though, too, but wrote some very, very irresistible documentation on the way to approach the same path of Jung as far as the individuation was concerned. So in a way, you can say, and I can't really say this about Jung, I can't really say this about I can't say it about any of them, but like, that one saying, you can learn a lot from a dummy. That old commercial, buckle your safety belt. You can learn a lot from individuals that you think are kind of crazy, kind of off their rocker. There's a fine line, once again, I'll say it, between genius and insanity, okay?
Let me tell you what they do to me. They cut my mail off. You can give this to the next wave of little kids that you grow up to. They cut my mail off. They lie. They cheat. They got some big old fat women that paint their faces and shit and dye their hair. And they cut the legs off the table so little girls can't get over and play with the little guys. And they got all kinds of little sex paranoias and little little deceiving, little lying, cheating little things that they play. And then they'll push them off on somebody else and say it's all their fault, that they're no good, and we got the bad guys locked up over here, and we're all the good guys. You dig what I'm saying? When in reality, man, you got a bunch of scurvy fucking PC motherfucking pieces of shit. You dig what I'm saying? But that's on one hand. Here's where Abraxas comes in. If they didn't have the love to do it, who in the fuck would?
Who do you respect in the world?
I respect that same fucking asshole that I'm down on every day. That's Abraxas, man. We roll on it. We've been rolling on it ever since he come on the tier. He comes on the tier and says, fuck you, you son of a bitch. Those shit and piss in his face. You dig what I'm saying? Knock him down. And he comes back and feeds me with it. And lets me live. And when he lets me live, then I look back at him and I say, well, you know, you're not so bad after all if you let me live. So now I have to let you live. So as long as I'm in here, I got to let him live. Now, every time I come down off of this, you don't like me. Then I'm a no good son of a bitch. Because then I put a piece of steel right there on my leg, and I'm sure I can cut anything with any place I want to cut it. And I live within the sphere of me. I don't push it off on nobody else. You dig what I'm saying? And I stand back and give other people their space. You see what I'm saying? But if they don't give me respect, I'm sending all that back around. I'm sending it all back around. You see what I'm saying? Because I live in my mind.
Do you think your mind has power in the world?
Oh, I would imagine, yes.
Even though you're here?
Yes. Yeah, the last wave of these guys, that sent me to Vacaville are all gone now. Dr. Morgan blew his brains out.
You think you have an effect on what happens to the world?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Definitely. I'm out there on the highway. Sure, I'm out there on the highway. I'm out there on the highway in Big Dragon, in the underworld. I'm out there in Hawaii. I'm out there in all kinds of different things. You might say I'm kind of like Satan. I'm in so many different places at once. Yeah, it would be like Satan. It would be very sharp for one person to do all the things that I'm going to have to do to survive. In you, and in you, and in you, and in you. Good God, man, ain't you fed on me enough? 2,000 years ain't made you fat enough to get off my fucking neck, man, you dig? And then you see Jesus, and you see Christ as being a little God, partner. Because I had the altars of the Druids long before the cross came. And the altars of the Druids will be there long after the cross is gone. Whether the Christians like to accept it or not, you dig what I'm saying? The cross came by and passed by my window, and I seen it go by, and I said, Christ was a little God. But he's a reality in this world because he holds atomic warfare. And we can't blow the world up. We don't want to blow the world up. So all those that live in the thought of we don't want to blow the world up, you dig what I'm saying?
So, let me see. Several ideas of who Abraxas is from religious and mystery traditions. As an Archon, as an Archon, in the system described by Irenaeus, the unbegotten Father is the progenitor of Nous, and Nous produced Logos. Logos produced Phronesis. Phronesis produced Sophia and Dynamis. Sophia and Dynamis produce principalities, powers, and angels, the last of whom create the first heaven. They in turn originate a second series who create a second heaven. The process continues in a like manner until 365 heavens are in existence. The angels of the last or visible heaven become the authors of our world. The ruler, Principim, for example, probably Tone, Archonta of the 365 heavens is Abraxas, and for this reason he contains within himself 365 numbers. The name occurs in the Refutation of All Heresies by Hippolytus, who appears in these chapters to have followed the exegetica of Basilides. After describing the manifestation of the gospel in the Ogdoad and Hebdomad, he adds that the Basilidians have a long account of the innumerable creations and powers in the several stages of the upper world, which is called the diastemmata, in which they speak of 365 heavens and say that their great archon is Abraxas because his name contains the number 365. The number of the days of the year, for example, the sum of the numbers denoted by Greek letters alpha, beta, rho, alpha, and I think that's Psi, alpha, and then I think the letter for S, according to the rules of Isopsephy, which is like a Greek variation of Gematria, is 365. Okay. So as a god, let me see. As a god, Epiphanius appears to follow partly Irenaeus, partly the lost compendium of Hippolytus. He designates Abraxas more distinctly as the power above all and the first principle, the cause and first archetype of all things, and mentions that the Basilidians refer to 365 as the number of parts, mele, in the human body, as well as the day of the year, getting back to that idea of Abraxas being kind of a type of the original man, if you will. Okay, Adam Kadmon, you know, and that was an idea from a Hebrew scholar. Okay, so the author of the appendix to Tertullian de Prescur Hayer, who likewise follows Hippolytus's compendium, adds some further particulars that Abraxas gave birth to mind, Nous. We talked about Nous in some previous videos, the first in the series of primary powers, enumerated likewise by Irenaeus and Epiphanius, that the world as well as the 365 heavens was created in honor of Abraxas, and that Christ was sent not by the maker of the world but by Abraxas. Now, I made a footnote to this. This links Abraxas very closely with the idea of Prometheus, and the way in which Prometheus suffered on Mount Caucasus is not too different in comparison to the death of Christ on Golgotha, which means a place of a skull, the head, right, where Adam was said to have been buried. The vulture which tormented Prometheus, the giver of consciousness to mankind, for example, by taking fire from Olympus, is symbolized by Saturn, so that the eagle is symbolized by Saturn, or the vulture rather is symbolized by Saturn, which is the world in the tarot, which is card 21, and the cross also is symbolized by card 21. And remember, it is equivalent to the sun, or hexagram, card number 19, or symbol 19, which is the sun, the universe being the hexagram. Okay, he eventually strangles this bird. He being Prometheus eventually strangles the vulture, so that's his victory over the cross, if you will, which torments him after Heracles frees him from the chains Zeus placed him in for saving humanity from the god Zeus's oppression. The earth and water are mother symbols, which Saturn as mother in the Qabalistic system, and water are such. Wood is also a feminine attribute as well, all from whence the solar or fire deities Christ, Prometheus, Mithras, from the tree and stone, basically his birth, which is of Saturn. That's where they rise from, okay? So even the sin of Adam resulted in the progression of consciousness and civilization. So he may be said to be Promethean via his interaction with Eve and the serpent. He dies and is buried on Golgotha. From his grave, Christ's cross emerges, okay? So Adam brought death by his act of experiencing the forbidden fruit, but in his death brought life in Christ, who was sent by Abraxas. as that footnote, as this is a footnote to what we just read, okay? Honoring Egyptology, it is wise to note that Ra, the sun god, rises up from the tree he is born from. This also, as an idea, gets into autochthonic deities. Abraxas is said to be the life of the earth. Autochthones are people or gods sprung from the earth itself. They belong to the land eternally, born from trees, soil, rocks, etc. Okay? Nothing can be built. So we're continuing reading on the idea of Abraxas as a god. Okay? Nothing can be built on the vague illusions of Jerome, according to whom Abraxas meant for Basilides the greatest god, the highest God, the Almighty God, and the Lord, the Creator. The notices in Theodoret, Augustine, and Predestinatus have no independent value. There were a lot of ideas on who the figure of Abraxas could be, and not to say that I'm above error in any way, or anybody else that is talking about Abraxas on YouTube at this day and age. There's so many ideas that have come down to us, though. But if we look at the 7 sermons of Jung, he talks about East meeting West with the idea of his exposition of Abraxas. And the thing is I think that's a hint to look into the Taoist idea, and also to look into, for instance, the Hindu Para Brahman, because the name of Para Brahman have the idea of Abraxas implicitly within it. Even when you look into the etymology, which I will approach in the second lecture. Okay, so let me go back to reading this. It is evident from these particulars that Abraxas was the name of the first of the 365 archons, and accordingly stood below Sophia and Dynamis and their progenitors, but his position is not expressly stated, so that the writer of the supplement to Tertullian has some excuse for confusing him with the supreme god. So now getting to the idea of Abraxas as an aeon. Abraxas, let me see, hold on. With the availability of primary sources, such as those in the Nag Hammadi library, the identity of Abraxas remains unclear. The Holy Book of the Great Invisible Spirit, for instance, refers to Abraxas as an aeon dwelling with Sophia, which is the wisdom deity, of course, right? And other aeons of the pleroma in the light of the luminary Aleleth. In several texts, the luminary Aleleth is the last of the luminary spiritual lights that come forward, and it is the aeon Sophia associated with Aleleth who encounters darkness and becomes involved in the chain of events that lead to the demiurge's rule of this world and the salvage effort that ensues. As such, the roles of the aeons of Eleleth, including Abraxas, Sophia, and others, pertains to this outer border of the pleroma that encounters the ignorance of the world of lack and interacts to rectify the error of ignorance in the world of materiality. And I wrote a footnote on this. These names would deal definitely with the levels of anima and animus development and clue one into where the sources of inspiration may come from when dealing with personal inner work and elevation, i.e. individuation. Okay, and that's for real. Like when we get into the second lecture, you'll see that a lot of Jung's ideas on individuation and where these pulls to move upward into a unification of opposites within ourself, and really the nullification of opposites by balancing them and by non-identification. You'll see that there's a light, a one light that is dual, and one is the light of desire that keeps people down and keeps people, stuck on the things of the world. And then there's that same light, it also has an inspiring aspect to it that links you towards desire for divinity. Okay, and I say that a lot because it's such a unifying doctrine to the understanding of many of these things that we're going to be talking about here on this channel. Okay, so anyways, Abraxas as a demon. The Catholic Church later deemed Abraxas a pagan god and ultimately branded him as a demon, as documented in J. Colin de Plancy's Infernal Dictionary. Abraxas, or Abraxas, is labeled the supreme god of the Basilidians, whom he describes as heretics of the 2nd century. He further indicated that the Basilidians attributed to Abraxas the rule over 365 skies and 365 virtues. In a final statement on Basilidians, de Plancy states that their view was that Jesus Christ was merely a benevolent ghost sent on earth by Abraxas. So we're going to go back to the idea of Enantiodromia in order to concrete the ideas disseminated a bit further. Okay, so there's a curious gematria here of Abraxas. You have force, change, and duration being ideas that show the effect of Abraxas. Abraxas being the effective deity, the effective god, the god of effect, okay, of the opposites, all right? So force links to the number 80, okay? Change to the number 50. Duration to the number 400. 80 would be Mars. 50 would be Scorpio. 400 would be Saturn. So we would get the number 530 from that, okay? And the word that we would get out of the number 530 would be kol, okay? And kol, it means all or every. So pan is the idea of all. And Carl Jung referred to Abraxas as Pan, okay? Also referred to him in the idea of Dionysus, which is the same thing as Pan, okay? So it can be boiled down to the number 50 as well, though, too. 50 going back to the idea of change, transformation, death, but death being the end of something, the beginning of something else, okay? So this is something that links to an understanding of the idea of Abraxas as well, who is effect and affect, who is a god to be experienced, okay? So, and that gets into the idea of the energy, you know, I mean, understanding the symbol of this deity as an energy, okay? So we're going to go into an overview of this deity again here. So Jung was heavily influenced by Friedrich Nietzsche, and Nietzsche discusses this idea in several areas of his work. For instance, Human, All Too Human, Aphorisms 1, 2, and 3, and it also in Beyond Good and Evil, Aphorism 2. The word Enantiodromia was apparently coined by Stobaeus, but the concept is implied also in Heraclitus' writings. Heraclitus says, cold things warm, warm things cool, wet things dry, and parched things get wet. It also seems implicit in other of his sayings, like war is the father of all, or the king of all. They do not know that the differing / opposed things agree with itself. Harmony is reflexive. Palintropos is used of a compound bow, or in reflexive tension, for instance, right? In reflexive tension, like the bow and the lyre. In these passages and others, the idea of the coincidence of opposites is clearly articulated in Heraclitus's characteristic riddling style, as well as the dynamic motion back and forth between the two, generated especially by opposition and conflict. Jung himself wrote, old Heraclitus, who was indeed a very great sage, discovered the most marvelous of all psychological laws, the most marvelous of all of them, okay? The regulative function of opposites. He called it Enantiodromia, a running contrariwise, by which he meant that sooner or later everything runs into its opposite. Roughly a generation later, Plato in the Phaedo articulated the principle clearly. Everything arises in this way, opposites from their opposites. Since Jung's modern recognition of it many centuries later, since Jung's modern recognition of it many centuries later, it has been actively portrayed in modern culture. For example, it has been applied to the subject of the film The Lives of Others to show how one devoted to a communist regime breaks through his loyalty and emerges a humanist. And also that movie American History X, about this neo-Nazi living in Long Beach. He ended up, committing a crime, going to prison, and, reconciling with a better ideology, and, try to turn the ideas of neo-Nazism around and save people from the organization he was once a part of, and ended up, I think his brother ended up getting killed in the movie. Long story short, but you have movies that are based on this idea, and they really make for great movies. Okay, so anyways, in particular, Jung used the term to refer to the unconscious acting against the wishes of the conscious mind, which we talked about earlier, updating the Greek concept of akrasia in modern psychological terms. Enantiodromia, literally running counter to, referring to the emergence of the unconscious opposites in the course of time. This characteristic phenomenon practically always occurs when an extreme one-sided tendency dominates conscious life. In time, an equally powerful counterposition is built up, which first inhibits the conscious performance and subsequently breaks through the conscious control. This idea of enantiodromia, so this is a personal footnote I put in here, this idea of enantiodromia corresponds also to the fourth law of Hermeticism in the Kybalion, the principle of polarity. Everything is dual. Everything has poles. Everything has its pairs of opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature but different in degree. Extremes meet. All truths are but half-truths. All paradoxes may be reconciled. And because of its relativity to principle number 4, principle number 5 should be read, the principle of rhythm. Everything flows out and in. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. The pendulum swing manifests in everything. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. The Kybalion, a text on alchemical laws, is a good yet very short manual to read in order to get a very replete understanding of the ideas of Jung, especially more obscure ideas such as Abraxas within the empirical scope of analytic psychology. Okay. So let me see. Enantiodromia is typically experienced in conjunction with symptoms associated with acute neurosis and often foreshadows a rebirth of the personality. So this is something that like totally could resurface the face of your life, and that's why I really felt it was important to talk about Abraxas today on this channel, because going back into this, as you teach, you learn. So by me having to research something, going back and, man, I didn't read this. Let me check this out. You know what I'm saying? Let me look into this. It basically meaning like, as you teach, you learn. Like you basically find how important a situation or a subject, for instance, that you're describing, you find out how key and how pivotal, or maybe how insignificant it actually is. And the idea of Abraxas is very, very, very significant to a lot of different schools of thought, philosophies, psychological ideas. I mean, there are even ideas in Lacanian psychology that explain the idea of Abraxas very well, meaning it's a meta truth. Okay, so let's see. The grand plan on which the unconscious life of the psyche is constructed is so inaccessible to our understanding that we can never know what evil may not be necessary in order to produce good by Enantiodromia, and what good may very possibly lead to evil, and vice versa for that matter, you know? Enantiodromia also refers to the process whereby one seeks out and embraces an opposing quality from within, internalizing it in a way that results in individual wholeness. The process is the crux, or the cross, of Jung's notion called the path of individuation. One must incorporate an opposing archetype into their psyche to obtain a state of internal completion.